You're listening to The Photography Pod, a show for both working professionals and enthusiast photographers alike. And here's your hosts, Steve Vaughan and Nick Church.
Hello, welcome, and thank you for downloading the Photography Pod. This is me, Nick Church, your host, and Steve Vaughan is also usually here, although the observant among you will notice that he's not here today. So the Photography Pod brings you on a fortnightly basis, because we're not crazy, fortnightly basis, the most inspirational photographers in the world. And my good mate, Steve, who's otherwise engaged today, is usually doing this with me, but so I'm flying solo. So, but I have got a photographer that's very much in that category, whose name is Cristian Barnett, a food photographer. So we'll be talking to Chris shortly. Can't wait to get started with that. So where is Steve? I hear you all cry. Well, as Steve's mentioned before, Steve is in the process of not stopping photography, but stopping the wedding business part of his photography. So he's sort of in an exit kind of strategy. So he's researching retirement locations. Now, where is he going? That's the question. Where's Steve going to be retiring to? So reports have suggested maybe Kettering. Some people say it might be Kidderminster or Kuala Lumpur, and we don't know. But what we do know is that it'll be somewhere with a healthy supply of betting shops and tobacconists, which are the two things that Steve values most in a local area. This is the first one I've done on my own, and it's great because I can just carry on rambling absolute nonsense like this about Steve without him arguing against me. So it's all very good. Normally we would say what we've been doing this week. Now this week has been the lead up to Christmas. So it's the 10th of December today. So this will be out probably just before Christmas for you, the listener. So Christmas is fully being installed at the church household. But I'm in that usual throes of trying to get my backlog of editing and films to be processed before the end of the year. Now, what we're all trying to avoid is the situation of everybody in the house galloping down loads of mulled wine while I'm sat looking at the AI remove progress bar in Lightroom slowly going across trying to get through my edits. So I want to avoid that, but it's going pretty well. I've got another shoot in Anglesey tomorrow. So for somehow I've become the go-to person for luxury interiors photography in Anglesey. Now, as I'm based in Bristol, that's the most crazy preferred supplier gig going with the distance. Pretty impractical. But I do enjoy it, and that's going to be a good one. So anyway, that's enough about me. So let's get on to our guest today. We've got with us Cristian Barnett, Cristian is a food and drink and restaurant photographer. I'm going to talk a bit about that as well. But he's got loads of other personal projects as well that he works on. So Cristian, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me, Nick.
Now, rather than me give a boring background about it, it'd be much more sensible for you to just give us a sort of bit of a potted history of Cristian Barnett. Would you mind doing that?
Yeah. So I've been a photographer for a long time. I think I did my first professional shoot in about 1999. But I studied photography and then I left to work as a freelance assistant. So pretty much since I left school sometime in the late 1800s, all I've done is photography, really. I didn't really have a plan to be a food photographer, but towards the end of my assisting career, I happened to assist a food photographer. Really liked his work and saw that as a potential space for me to work in. I liked the variety of it, and after seeing some of his clients, eventually decided that was my career path.
Amazing. So if for the listener, if you look at Cristian's website, so it's www.cristianbarnett. Now it's Cristian without an H, so Cristian Barnett T.com to look at Cristian's photos, and they are absolutely stunning. So Chris's pictures of food and drink are just beautiful. We're going to come on to that in a moment. So do have a look at Cristian's website. Chris, what kit are you using for do you tend to use the same kit? Have you got like a go-to setup?
Yeah, so I use Fujifilm. I shoot most of my still life work with the GFX system, which I absolutely love.
Okay.
And then for any kind of reportage, chefs running around kitchens, etc., then I use the smaller X system for that, and I also use the X system for video as well.
Oh, do you? Okay. And have you always been a Fujifilm shooter?
No, so pretty much. So I started my career as an analog photographer, pre-digital, and then I was shooting with film Hasselblad. So when I digitized, I think about 2004, 2005, then I bought into the Hasselblad digital system. So I used that right up until probably just before COVID.
Okay.
I didn't know COVID was coming, and I decided to change my whole camera system. Spent a lot of money just before everything shut down.
Great idea.
But I did have a lot of time to play with my new camera.
How do you find it compares to the Hasselblad? And they're quite different systems.
Oh, so at that time I had the GFX 50R, which was the rangefinder camera, which they don't make any longer. But I think that's probably the greatest camera I've ever owned. It's just absolutely phenomenal. I think for anyone who's struggled on professionally with a Phase 1 or a Hasselblad over the years, I mean, they were so problematic. If anything went wrong, it was a complete nightmare to deal with. Very poor at high ISOs, and all of a sudden, this Fuji just released this medium format camera, which was just astonishing. It's like working with a DSLR, but medium format quality. It's unbelievable, and cheap as chips.
Yeah, well, compared with the Hasselblad, certainly, I imagine.
Yeah.
So the medium format, is that a system that fits your work? Is that would you say that's part of your the look to your photos comes from that approach? Yeah,
definitely, because I've always been a medium format photographer, as I said, and I work from a tripod. I do everything quite slowly. Everything's considered. I'm really a studio photographer who works on location, so I like slow everything down and make sure everything's perfect. I'm not someone who's running around with a camera or standing on chairs, handheld, anything like that. It's all it's precision as much as it can be in a busy hotel or a restaurant. I just love the colors the Fuji camera gives me, and I love the fact that because I'm not always working in controlled environments, the depth of information in a Fuji file is amazing. I mean, you could really just guess the exposure, and you'd be able to pull it back somehow. They're just such phenomenal files, and I love the lenses as well. Great.
The exact what you say there about the precision of your approach and the colors. That, I mean, for people that are checking out Cristian's website, that is completely evident. It's just jaw-dropping images on there. I'm gonna now you are we're going to cover some of your other photography later, but you are primarily food, drink, and these commissions. Is it the case that those commissions are the earning opportunities, and these other ones are more passion projects?
Yeah, I've always been somebody who's tried to persuade my clients to find a slightly different way of doing things. So I'm always trying to push my clients wherever I can. So sometimes those passion projects can turn into client collaborations. A lot of food photography is influenced by Instagram, as is every genre of photography, really. So it's very easy to get stuck in a sort of creative loop, and you see the same things over and over again. So it's constantly trying to think, well, how can we do something different? How can we do something slightly more interesting? And a lot of my very good clients are receptive to do it, to doing that. So it's I do try and encourage my clients to see things more creatively if possible. But I think every photographer really should have at least some kind of at least one or two personal projects on the go, because it's
I totally agree. It's something that we've talked about often on this podcast, that getting into that rut of delivering the same, especially when you've got different clients who haven't seen all your previous shoots, that would be perfectly happy with ones that were exactly the same as the previous one. It can really hit the creativity, and having other outlets for that is super important. I'm going to just see if I can share some of your photos here. Let me see if that works. I think that should be coming through now. So with regards, you talked there a bit about your process, about looking for something different. How much of that comes from the client and how much is from your plan before the shoot?
I'd say generally speaking, I'm usually driving that wherever possible. Sometimes clients want something slightly more, slightly different, slightly more unusual. There's obviously a lot of reticence from clients about doing something that's too different, because at the end of the day, the whoever's commissioning me is responsible for whatever I'm doing. So they don't want it to kind of nothing to backfire, or to end up doing anything controversial or anything that would demean their brand in any way. So it's a little bit of a fine line there, but if sometimes it can be quite simple things. It might just be about changing the lighting something, or just finding slightly more unusual compositions. But there's a restaurant, one of my clients, one of my favorite restaurant clients, is a 3 Michelin star restaurant in Cumbria, and we've kind of slowly been taking everything outdoors. We were shooting.
Can you share the name, Cristian?
It's L'Enclume. It's
L'Enclume.
Yeah.
So L'Enclume.
Yeah, French for blacksmith. Yeah, and it's been really fun because we've been taking the shots outdoors, but still in a way that reflects the restaurant, reflects the location of the restaurant. So we kind of tentatively went out into the garden, and then there's a little stream outside, and then we ended up in the stream, and we were floating dishes down the river. And the last shoot we did, we were in the forest and hedges, but the pictures still, they have to, you can't just do that for, just because it's fun to do. We still have to try and make sure that those the shots are respectful to the food and the ethos of the restaurant and the landscape. So there has to be a kind of purpose.
Sure, and I guess that sort of more contemporary approach, shall we say, to food photography is very specific to a particular brand, restaurant, or chef. That it wouldn't apply anyway to other, a different chef. They're all going to have. It has to be, part of their character, presumably.
Exactly. So that particular restaurant, they have different restaurants within the group, and I do similar things with some of their other spaces, but we take an individual approach each time to reflect the restaurant, the location of the restaurant, the style of food. So it just keeps me engaged, because one of the brilliant things about food photography is that it is so varied. I get bored very, very easily, so I couldn't just sort of turn up and just photograph plates of food on a table every day in, day out. So with food photography, allows me to shoot interiors, shoot portraits of chefs, travel, farmers, cheesemakers. It's such a broad spectrum
down the supply chain through the providers.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's if you like variety in your work, food is just such a great genre to work in.
I think that's because I do interiors, which I'm doing tomorrow. Excuse me. And weddings as well. So it's a commercial work and weddings. And the combination of those two is really important for me, because, as you can imagine, a wedding is the exact opposite. Nothing's under your control. You're just trying to get the best shots you can. Sure. I mean, some wedding photographers do spend a lot of time on more of a similar approach to what you would use. But that's not my documentary type approach. It's more about kind of just trying to get the best that you can and having ideas on the fly, off the hoof, standing on chairs, as you said, camera in the air, trying to get those sorts of things. When you talk about your clients, would that be a restaurant owner, head chef, or a variety?
Variety really. So sometimes, because I'm not the cheapest food photographer in the world, so it tends to be very high-end restaurants and restaurants within hotel groups as well. So they tend to have slightly better budgets. But that's one part of my work. The other thing I love about food is that it's not just the style of work that varies. It's also the client. So I shoot cookbooks, and that's a very, very different way of working to working in a restaurant. A little bit of commercial work. So this, you can just have, you can go weeks and weeks and weeks and kind of do something very different each time without there being any repetition.
I think what is across all of your work, the consistency across all your work just shows very close attention to lighting, to composition, to colours and tone. And so I absolutely can see that these shots are come from a place of passion as well. It's not just, right, let's get this dish and move on. They're very extremely well. They're just beautifully thought through. What is your lighting setup for some of these?
Well, my lighting setup kind of came about. The current lighting setup I'm working with now came about during COVID, and this is again going back to shooting personal projects. So during COVID, I was kind of after about 3 days, I was completely fed up. So I decided to take portraits of people where I live and record their experiences. And I thought, well, I'm just going to try this in a completely different way to the way I normally work. So I started lighting with small softboxes, lighting people in a way where I could also stay socially distant. And normally my work had been sort of, I guess, quite naturalistic up to that point. And then I started to really enjoy lighting outside and combining daylight with flash. And then I started to take that into how I shoot food, and it became more entirely flash. So it's very controlled. I use very small softboxes. Sometimes I use one which is about, I don't know, like almost A4 size. It's very small.
Okay.
And then a 70 centimeter square. So I'm not lighting anything that isn't there. And then quite often I use a snoot or just to ping little bits of light into the background, because when you're using very controlled lights, you inevitably end up with a dark background, which I really like anyway, but I don't like completely black background. So I can use a little snoot and just ping out a little bit of color, a little bit of texture somewhere. So I quite enjoy that, sort of creatively trying to build up the way I light something. I really enjoy that a lot.
Yeah, well, I think you can see that. Let me just share these images again. You can see that context for these shots. That's a really important thing. Which is one of my questions was going to be: Are any of these studio shots, or are they all in situ?
They are all location. Yeah.
Right. So I mean, yeah. So that's very challenging, isn't it? When you've got lighting in the background that's out of your control. So you're using your lights to pick out certain elements in the background to give it that context and sort of anchor the dishes in that environment and get the right sort of ambience.
Yeah.
But still let the food do the talking. I guess the smaller lighting systems help that because you can get much closer and it's just not going to spill everywhere.
Completely. And also if you're working in a public space, you're not then having to worry about the ambient lighting. Because if you were using daylight or you're using LED, you would inevitably have other forms of light would be interfering with your shot. So when you're using flash, and especially when you're using flash very, very close, you don't need very powerful flash because it's you're just using even with low-powered flash heads, you're still using minimum power, and you don't have to worry about anything. You don't have to worry about spotlights, daylight.
And if you're on your tripod, then you could your shutter speed can be anything pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you can, yeah.
So it's so I've been able to sort of develop that kind of studio control, but also the way I work is very quick as well. So I work from a C stand with a knuckle, so I can basically my light is almost always horizontal above the food, and I can maneuver that really, really quickly because I've taken so many pictures, so I know exactly where if the lighting's not working, I know exactly where it needs to be, and I can kind of spin around with it, and it's very mobile as well, so I can kind of shift around, from one part of it. So
it's like a Godfather style lighting, but with some scallops.
Yeah, exactly. I shall call it that style of lighting for now. Yeah, that's perfect.
It sounds like you have a close relationship with your clients, and it's not just can we book you and you rock up. It's a discussion about what the end product's what the end shot's going to look like. Does the client have? Do they get involved in the actual shooting process? Are they looking at your shots as you're taking them and making suggestions? Or
pretty much. It's I always prefer to work with clients who are involved. If you're photographing food, I really like to be involved with the chef. If I'm working with someone and they just sort of put the plate down and wander off, it's probably unlikely I'll work with that person again. I can't really work like that. It has to be a collaboration, and I do like working with. I've just supplied some shots today from a shoot I did last week or the week before with a client who was very, very involved. She knew exactly what she wanted, had a lot of creative ideas, and that was brilliant. I really enjoyed that. So it's there has to be some level of collaboration. Otherwise, I'm not, because collaboration infers kind of caring as well. And if I'm working with people who don't really care about what I'm doing, it's very hard for me to care about what I'm doing. And if you take that out of the equation, and I'm not interested.
No, I can understand that. And these dishes are works of art, aren't they? There's a lot of time and effort that gone into the placement and the colours and the produce and everything. So it would make sense to me that the chef is going to be very keen on how that's being represented in the final image. It's a bit like I work with a couple of artists doing just digitization of their oil paintings and things, and they're extremely fussy about the colours and what even to me looks like it's correctly cut. They'll have, because they've got such a trained eye, that sort of cyan isn't quite right in the background there, and so we're tweaking colours. And it's a live thing that we're often sitting down together, going through, making those very subtle changes.
Sure. And of course, it's working with really, really good chefs is also easy for me as well, because the food automatically looks great. If you're working with a chef who doesn't really know what they're doing, it's a much more difficult proposition to try and make their food look good. So it's I sometimes make that sort of equate food photography with fashion photography. If you're a fashion photographer and you've got great clothes, great models, you're kind of you're a long way to getting a good a great shot. And I think
you absolutely
food photography is very similar in that regard.
Yeah, if ever I'm shooting a property, like they tend to be higher end ones that they are interior designed to the max and they just look incredible. So if it's not, and they're asking me if I could sort of arrange things, like, that's not my that's not my that's not in my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
I can remove a carrier bag if that's in the way, because I can see that's not going to look great. But in terms of throwing scatter cushions or whatever, forget it. With your of all the commissions you've worked on, I mean, so you do a lot of bars and drinks as well, and there's so you've got a load of food photos on your portfolio, and some cocktails, and just all of these photos, drinks and food, just make me want to reach in and just grab it. They're just so inviting, and that's what comes through for me. Which one of these commissions would you say has been the most viewed in terms of sort of, what would be the most prolific in terms of if it's shots that people might know?
Good question. So I shoot all of Tom Kerridge's cookbooks. So his books sell hundreds of thousands. So I imagine there might be quite a lot of people watching this who've got a Tom Kerridge cookbook stashed away somewhere. We've shot enough of them, so it's probably a good chance.
Yeah, I know we have it.
There are a few around somewhere. So
he seems like a good egg, Tom Kerridge.
Tom is brilliant. I'm working at his restaurant tomorrow. I've worked with Tom a long time. He's everybody always asks me if Tom's as nice in real life as he is on TV. And I think he's probably a bit nicer. He's even nicer in real life.
He just seems. I listened to him on the Parenting Hell podcast with Josh Widdicombe and Rob Beckett, and that a podcast like that is very much a sort of stripping away all the stuff that you might do for TV. It's just yourself. And he just came across as a really intelligent, lovely guy. I really liked him.
Yeah, very, very intelligent. Yeah.
So, what's been without naming any clients, obviously, what sort of shoot would be the most challenging for you? You've mentioned it when there's not much engagement from the chef. That makes it quite difficult. Is there any other situations which make things difficult rather?
Yeah, I guess if you're in a situation where there is an issue, but to be honest, I've done such a good job. So one of the things I've been very, very good at over the years is, as hinted at earlier on, is just not working with people who I don't think are giving me what I need to be able to create the best work. So I've filtered down my clients to a degree where I don't really get that many issues, to be honest, because I've got clients I've worked with many, many years, and very good, loyal clients. In fact, some of my clients I've been working with, for over 20 years. So we all got very good relationship. We know exactly what I know what I need to deliver. They know what to expect, when I turn up. So the probably the one thing is that you have to be flexible. So when you're working in a hotel, you might get a shoot list, say, right, we're going to be here for 2 hours and there for 1 hour. And then, of course, when you arrive, they'll just say, well, actually, that room's now taken, that room's been booked, can't do that. So you just have to, you can't just sort of go, roll your eyes and think, well, I can't do that. You just have to accept the situation and just deal with it and move on. And I think I'm very good at doing that because I've just come to accept that's the way it is. And I think my clients appreciate that as well. You just have to be very, very flexible.
I guess the expectations of the clients of the restaurant or the hotel are very high in the sort of places you're working. So it's not like anyone couldn't be put out because, you just have to sort of fit in with people and they're not going to necessarily want to have a load of photography going on a table right next to where they're eating. So, for example, I'm guessing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something we're always very, very conscious of. In fact, some places I work at, we shoot on the day. A lot of restaurants are closed on a Monday, so quite often we'll shoot on the days when the restaurant is closed to make it less invasive.
So listening to Tom talk on this podcast about this sort of hours that a head chef is doing, I bet that's quite that must already mean that they're invested in getting these great photos because they have so little time off for their 1 day off that they're actually then coming back into the restaurant.
They're rarely very happy when they turn up. They're usually quite happy at the end of the day, but yeah. In fact, I once shot for one of Tom's cookbooks. We did a day in the life of his restaurant. So I started about 4:30 in the morning when the produce started to arrive at the hotel, at the restaurant, sorry. And then the first chefs kind of arrive 6:30, 7 o'clock to start prep, and then they've got lunch, and then they got dinner, and then it's kind of clean down afterwards. And we think we finished about 2 o'clock in the morning. And I went to the hotel and woke up about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but all those guys were back in there again at 6:30 in the morning. And wow, it's even though I've been working in restaurants for a long time, I had a whole new level of respect.
Yeah, well, likewise, just like when you hear them say about trying to have a social life where your friends saying, well, you come out, you go, yeah, I'll be there about 2:30 in the morning, is that all right? Yeah, that's probably a bit late, but that's when that's but their social time is basically very, very late in the evening, isn't it? And back in the morning, as you say.
Yeah.
So we come across through our Facebook group. I know listeners have got there's quite a few of people that are really into food photography, and I do photography coaching as well for people trying to make photography a more of a money earning or a career choice for them. And food photography is a very common thing that people are thinking to do, and I'm always cautious about that. I'm always saying I think it probably is quite a hard field to get into to be earning. Certainly, if you're going to leave your day job for it, it's going to be quite difficult to do that because whereas because the clients are just so specific about what they're looking for. Whereas weddings and events, I think a beginner can start to edge into those markets quite easily, much more easily anyway. Have you got any tips for the listener that might be keen to sort of try out food photography, how they could kind of get into that?
I think I'd suggest that they don't do it.
Well, that's no good because that's what I tell them as well. I was hoping a food photographer wouldn't say it.
You gave good advice. So I think one of the problems, because food, unlike when I first started in food photography had basically the same sort of level of kudos as sort of photographing underpants for supermarkets or something. It just wasn't cool at all. And then Jamie Oliver came along, and all of a sudden food was really cool. And that's and then with digitization and brilliant camera phones, there are just a lot of people doing it. So there's a sort of level, at that kind of entry level. I really don't know how you could make a living doing it. I think a lot of people who do it will be doing a combination of things. So they might be doing just content creation in general. So it might be video, it might be also posting for clients as well. So I think there's a lot of people doing that. So there will be either contributing to a social media feed or actually being completely responsible for running it. And I think that's how a lot of younger people are getting into that area. So they like the fact that they can do all of those different, all of those different elements. But the problem is, there might be a lot more restaurants, but at that kind of lower end, but they've got less budget, and there's a lot more people fighting to do that work, that kind of work.
Sure.
So I think unless
That's
you've got,
interesting.
yeah,
We're seeing a similar thing in the wedding industry with content creators that are so far it's videographers that are people are thinking, well, do I want more of a curated sort of wedding highlights film that's more cinematic, or do I just want some stuff for Instagram? And there is definitely a market for that, and that seems to be a very popular thing at the moment. And it tends to be because these are younger people and they know how to edit on their phone to get things out the next day, and their income requirements are lower, and so it is quite a challenge for the industry. So we'll see what happens there, and it sounds like it's a similar, for slightly different reasons, but a similar thing. Do you see any concern around probably the lower end of the food photography market from AI?
Well, I see concern everywhere, really. I don't think anyone can really predict the effects of AI on any genre within photography. And in fact, I'm kind of hedging my bets a little bit when it comes to that. So I've been very concerned about AI for about 2 years now, and been trying to figure out how to either adapt to it or find other ways of working around it, I guess. So because I've been a photographer for so long, I don't really want to find myself in a position where I'm working with really heavily manipulated images, working with combined AI. It really, really doesn't interest me aesthetically, creatively, technically. I just really don't want to do it. So the question then is, I saw this when I was a young photographer and digitization came along, and all of a sudden I saw lots of photographers who are probably my age back then decided, actually, maybe let's just get out of photography because we don't want to invest in equipment, we don't understand the technology. So I don't really want to be forced out of photography either. I really want to be able to stop being a photographer when I want to stop being a photographer, not because I can't make a living any longer. So I've actually got a few different sort of things I'm doing to hedge my bets against AI. So I've continually shot film ever since, because I've shot film since I was about 14 years old. But actually next year I'm going to formalize that. So I'm going to have a separate business, which is a commercial analog business. A lot of different reasons for that. But I think potentially that might be interesting in the future. I'm also working with a small video production company. So we're working on some of my existing clients to elevate, because like a lot of photographers, I do shoot a little bit of video, but I'm often frustrated by the lack of, I have a vision, but I'm not very often able to kind of fulfill that vision by myself. So it's really exciting working with other people, especially as someone who's been a kind of solo photographer for many years. And I think video, and actually, funnily enough, I'm less worried about using AI in video because I'm less precious about. For me, video is kind of new and exciting, and I'm less precious about it. I don't feel the same way about video work as I do about photography. So I'm happy to kind of embrace the technology when it comes to video. So I'm kind of trying to sort of basically work my way around AI rather than confront it.
I think it sounds like a sensible strategy, that is to have things that, so it's not all the eggs in one basket, and there's other opportunities. And yeah, but we'll have to wait and see. I mean, I suppose, like all photographers, feeling the same, that we just don't know at the moment what's going to happen there.
Yeah.
I think events and weddings have got, and portraits and things have obviously got the advantage that it's the people, and people want shots of either themselves or an experience they were part of, and you can't generally recreate that with AI. Things like product photography, I'm hoping, and maybe it's a bit altruistic, but I'm hoping that element of the personal and the creative input into it becomes more and more valuable, or is perceived to be more and more valuable, the more robotic AI stuff there is knocking about. So it is seen as something that's different, in the same way people want to buy a Swiss watch rather than a mass-produced watch. If people can afford it, they both do exactly the same job, but there is a if it matches your brand, to have something a bit more curated, thought about, creative, under control conditions and set up properly, then you're going to hopefully pay for it. And that's going to be more expensive than it is using AI. But who knows? We'll have to wait and see. I mean, sure, things like stock photography have pretty much, suffered a hit on that. But I think products is at least different in as much as those brands want to have the best looking photos. It's not just about having, let's say, an elderly Caribbean man's hands on a keyboard doing for a bit of content for a page for an article about elderly people, doing IT. So it's stock photography. Absolutely, probably. I don't even know. They still seem to be going stock photography sites. I don't know how, but hopefully we've got we've got other genres that will continue a bit longer. And who knows? Perhaps we'll ride through it. Certainly, all of the things around being able to differentiate shots that use AI from shots that don't. I think the more that technology develops and becomes more widespread in all cameras, not just Leica or I think Hasselblad might do that, so I'm not sure. Then that's presumably going to be helpful because that means there is a way for people easily to see. And if you can easily see the difference, whether one's AI and one's not, then that means that there is a perceived difference between those two. Whereas at the moment, people don't, they're all kind of blurred in together. You just can't tell.
Exactly.
So onto your passion projects, because I think these are really fascinating. Again, if people go to CristianBarnett.com and look at some of these. So there's a variety of things, and we won't go through all of them, but I was particularly interested in your project on displaced Ukrainians. And that was shot in Germany.
Germany
right,
and Poland.
Right.
Yeah.
And how did that come about? What was the backstory to that? Obviously, the backstory being the invasion from Russia. But how did you get involved? What happened?
Well, I was sort of in the process of organising a portrait project in Ukraine prior to the invasion, and probably like most people, I just never imagined it was going to happen. I was kind of, booking my plans, getting everything, ready to go. So I felt like I already had an interest in Ukraine. I was already thinking a lot about Ukraine before the invasion, and I was just completely shocked. I was just couldn't get my head around it. And I remember listening to interviews on the radio in the following days, people who had to leave the country, the scenes of of chaos, and I just really, really found this so shocking that Europe was at war. I really just couldn't believe it.
Mm.
And also, I was very disappointed by the British and the initial British reaction to that, and not really wanting to take people, especially when other countries like Poland and Germany were taking so many people. Yeah. So I happen to I have a friend who used to assist me who lives in Germany. So I called him and said, should we, if I come over, should we try and find some people? Which I did, and it was really, it's one of the most emotional, kind of most powerful things I think I've ever done. Really, just having those conversations with people, and this was really 6 weeks, 2 months, I think, after the invasion itself. So people were still very, very raw, and just listening to those stories that you've kind of read about in history books, the sort of having to flee your country in Europe.
So close to home.
Yeah.
So people that grab their passport papers and then they're out and that's it. There's no time to get anything else sometimes.
That was kind of one of the questions I was asking people. Was like, how much time did you have? What did you take? And quite often it was literally just, people had a bag by the door and just grabbed it and ran. It was
wow.
Yeah, really, really shocking. And lots of things that you just don't really think about necessarily. People trying to deal with their pets, making sure people know where everybody else is in the family, and the logistics of sort of getting out. And when you do get out, where do you go? It was really quite shocking, I think.
Yeah, it's a real upheaval. And if anyone thinks about the sorts of things you have to sort out when you're going on a long holiday, and then imagine that for all of your life, you're potentially never coming back to it. It's just, it doesn't bear thinking about. And as you say, Cristian, to have that happening so close to where we are in Europe, because I feel very European. I strongly feel that we are part of the same community of people, regardless what a lot of other people thought at the time. But yeah, so all of these images and stories, and some of them are on your website, and I love that we've got details about the people, not just images. So because I do find with some books that I've seen where it's just images, and they can be very striking, powerful images, but without that context, it can be very easy to not think about the actual human person behind it. The fact that this person's 43, she's got 2 kids, she's a radiographer, and she's left the country. I think without that sort of information, it can be too easy for people that have got discriminatory views on refugees or immigrants about what their background might be. And I think that really is a stark contrast when you can see exactly who these people are. They're a cross section of all of society. It's not not just one type of people that are in that situation. And these books, these images and the information, is that in a book? Would you like to talk about your books a little bit, Cristian?
One of the portraits did feature in a book, which I forget. I think it's actually I can't remember. It was a European portrait competition. So that was quite nice to have one of the pictures accepted into that. But otherwise, I think I've only had I've created one book myself. Picture portraits from the Arctic Circle.
Okay, and that's is that of landscapes, animals, or communities, people?
Mainly people. So I was following the line of the Arctic, not the actual Arctic itself, but the line of the Arctic Circle. So it was quite good fun because I didn't really decide where to go. There was basically, well, I have to go there because it's on the line. There's nothing else. There's nowhere else to go, really. So I ended up going to some really quite random places. I made about 13 trips to the Arctic across all the countries on the Arctic Circle. 9 countries, I think, on the Arctic Circle. So that was a really fun project, which I did over about 10 years, and I had that book published with the help of Kickstarter. That was quite an early Kickstarter project, which was really interesting as well. That was great.
And how did you find that process?
It was good. It was hard work. It's definitely not a sort of easy option, but the book would never have been made otherwise, I think. And it was really great to involve people before the book was published. So there was that kind of really nice involvement in everything kind of coming together. And I think by the time people received their books, it was very different experience to sort of just popping in a bookshop and taking something off a shelf. Yeah.
And can people order that through your website? Or they can contact you?
Not at the moment, but I think it might be on Amazon. Am I allowed to say Amazon? I think of course. You can still find it online. It's called Life on the Line.
Okay. No, I'll put a link to it in the show notes when because there's a webpage for each of our episodes, so I'll put a link to that in there. Well, Cristian, thank you so much for talking to us today. That has been genuinely fascinating. And as I said, people do check out CristianBarnett.com and look through all Cristian's work because it is just phenomenal. And thank you so much again, Cristian, for joining the Photography Pod. So thank you for listening and thank you for downloading, everybody. Please do subscribe, and please do mention to all of your friends, anyone that you think might be interested in the content that we've got on the show and the photographers that we're bringing to you, then please do spread the word and just share things around. Join the Facebook group as well. That's a good place to get articles, more information, background on, for example, the links that we've talked about today. Then they'll all be on the Facebook group as well. So just search Facebook for the Photography Pod and you'll find us, and we'll let you in. All right, so that's all for today. We won't do our Tech 10 or industry news this week because next week Steve and I are doing an in-person record. So that's when he'll probably give me a dead arm for telling everybody that he loves tobacco and betting shops. But that will be in here. So we'll be doing that in person, and we're going to go through some more technical news and some more industry stuff at that point. So that's all for tonight. That's a wrap. Thanks again, Cristian, and thanks everybody for listening. My pleasure.
It's been a pleasure.
Great stuff. All right. Thanks very much then, everyone. All right. Bye, Cristian.